Welcome to Puck Talk CS. I'm Chives, Matthew Mugno alongside Steve Murno, co-host here. Puck Talk CS, plenty on the docket. Filip Chytil, Kaapo Kakko trade rumors. We got it all to talk about today in a little bit of a short period of time. I'm doing this on the lunch break. So, Steve, how we doing on this fine February 1?
I'm doing great, Chives, and I hope everybody that's listening is doing just as well. We going into that All-Star break, so the madness kind of ends a little bit here. So let's talk some puck, and we have a lot to digest. First things first, we'll give our quick reactions on the news of Filip Chytil going down. Chives, I'll let you jump in right away. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a shame. I was there for his first practice back. And it seemed like things were going great. He was participating in drills, like he was skating smooth. The hands, were there. He still has that skill level. I was not at Madison Square Garden. It was a very small contingent of reporters that were there, and a lot of them missed it because, listen, when three guys are on the ice and they're just kind of partaking in extra drills, like you're not fully paying attention to what's going on out there. Like you're writing your piece or you're getting ready to interview maybe players on the away team. So for that media availability and the locker room availability. So I saw a lot of against the few guys that were there, like Dan Rose and Johnny was there. And it's like, listen, they may have missed it, but it's just the fact that something happened. It's not really about who reported it. It's more about the health of the player. That's what it comes down to. The organization made a decision. And as time's gone on, now I think the team's going to really miss Phil. He was the media. They hand out an award every year for the player that best works with the media. And he was the winner from last season. So they gave it to him the first practice this year in training camp. So it's a shame because he's a great locker room guy. He's obviously, out of the young guys, the guy that's blossomed the most, Steve. So 24 years old, health comes first. I'm just wishing him the best.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear that he won that award because he's gonna have to deal with a lot when he comes back eventually. I'll say this: I kind of expected this. I know. I don't think I think before we had Steve Levy on in that episode, I think both of us pretty much didn't think that it was a good chance of seeing him come back, and then the news comes out he's back here in the U.S. He's back at MSG with the team, and then we expect him back, and then now he's done, and it is a big loss. But at the same time, it doesn't really affect this team and the way this team is playing these last 3 months because they didn't have him. So with that being said, moving on, I mean, we have a big problem on our hands here, Chavs. I mean, the Rangers had an absolutely disgusting January. I think they only won 4 out of 12 games. Obviously, we're not in the top spot in the Eastern Conference anymore, but I think it's obviously clear that we're definitely not the best team. And our lead is shrunken in the Metro. Yeah, I think we're, in a sense, you only win 4 to 12. I think we're lucky to be in the position that we are right now. Carolina hasn't played. They've surged, but they haven't played that great. So what do you think the status of this team is right now? And we're going to jump into our main discussion here, which is going to be a pretty big one considering the Rangers only won 4 to 12 games in January.
14, 12, and 2 since December 1st. It's now February 1st, all-star break right now. Didn't play well through January. Not going to pat us on the back. It's things you and I have talked about all season. When things go wrong, what's going to kind of pop up and be the story? Blake Wheeler's production, right? Who's on the first line right wing, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Kaapo Kakko, where does he fit in when he comes back? The third line lacking a little bit of an identity. Scoring at 5-on-5. Is it the organization trying to get blood from a stone at this point? Is it something where they look and they say, all right, we're going to need some additions that maybe we didn't account for? Aside from Filip Chytil, I'm talking that's its own situation. And they're going to probably have to respond to that with a move. And based on the Lindholm trade, it's going to be interesting to see. That's an indicator of what the market's looking like. Overall, with the team's gameplay, this break, I think, comes at a good time. You get a confidence win in Ottawa. Connor Mackey with the Jacob Trouba helmet throw 2.0. Fights Brady Tkachuk in his own building, gets the boys going. And you win 7-2, score 7 unanswered against a team that you should beat if you're in the top of the Eastern Conference. But it was a good confidence win. Break time now. They got a hefty schedule coming out of it. So February is going to be a huge litmus for this team.
Yeah, and you hope that some of the good things that we saw in that Senators game can transition over and are positive. But again,
right?
the Ottawa Senators are not a good team.
Listen, they're going to be selling, right? So the reality is like you the expectation if you're the top of the Eastern Conference is that you beat a team like that.
Yeah, for sure. Now listen, there's no doubt here, and we've all heard these rumors now that Kaapo Kakko is on the block. And he, quite frankly, probably when you look at this team and you look at players that are definitely staying, you have your solidified five. You got Carter Zibanejad, Panarin, Trocheck, Fox. Those are players that are not moving. Players like Truber and Miller, they ain't going anywhere. Kaapo Kakko, when you look up and down this lineup, he's probably the Rangers' best trade piece, Chives. I mean, you would have to think, at being the best realistic trade piece. His name alone, quite frankly, could probably bring in two missing pieces, at least two. You could bring in maybe a third C, and you could bring in maybe a scoring winger, two positions that the Rangers have kind of been lacking. And listen, Kakko's young, former second overall pick. He's a defensive forward. And he's kind of been very close to breaking out, you feel like, but in New York, he just hasn't seemed to gotten, his chance, and you kind of get the sense here that he's not going to light up the world on fire, but he can at the same time be a solid 15 to 20 goal scorer and maybe a 45, maybe stretch it to 50-point two-way player if realistic. So Chives, what do you think? You dig in these rumors with Kakko? What are you feeling? Or do you think that this is just talk? Because, obviously Drury, and every GM considers, everybody on the block to improve any aspects of their team. So what do you make of these rumors of Kakko?
Speculation, right? Darren Dreger drops this bomb on TSN on their insider trading show. And the reality is, if he's got sources that are stating Drury's taking calls, it's about the weight of those calls, and with speculation, we're speculating what the return would be, what the market's looking like, what players the Rangers are looking to field, who they're looking to, potentially move. I liked what you stated. Not many people have said the words in that short phrase. Kakko would be the top trade piece for the Rangers moving forward. Part of me thinks if you are in on this year, the first rounder shouldn't be a question because in 2022, the team was very good. And they traded a first round pick, actually, I believe a second round pick that became a conditional first to get Andrew Copp. That's not a player at that time, context wise. He turned into a top centerman for a team, right? Like a 2C that he is in Detroit right now. And he played that way in New York. He was great on the wing with Panarin and Strome. With that stated, context wise, Andrew Copp was not a player at that time in February, March 2022 that anyone would say trade a first round pick for. With that stated, I think a lot of fans online, a lot of the conversation has been to avoid trading the first round pick this year. And I would argue that that should also be in play. Kaapo Kakko would be the roster player you send, and you might need to fork up a first rounder, but just based on the Lindholm trade alone that we saw in the last few days and how that developed. So I think Kaapo, I am in the corner, and I believe that he's a third line checking forward. He should get more of an opportunity on the first line. He can become that complementary player, one of the best puck protectors in the league, solid IQ. He has the potential in the ceiling. He's 22 years old, UFA in the summer. What it'll come down to, does he sign a contract in the next few weeks? With Filip Chytil last season, he signed on March 29th, and that signified I'm here for the next 4 years. I'm not hitting the market. If Kakko doesn't sign soon, you might have to trade him because if you don't know you're going to get assets for him in the summer, you might have to trade him midseason when his stock is a little bit higher. Granted, 6 points on the year. I don't think that necessarily paints the whole picture of how he's played and what he brings to the roster as a defensive forward, as you mentioned. But it will be interesting. I think he is the number one guy potentially in play. The Rangers just need a solid return. This can't be a player that's a rental, and this team, if they potentially lose in the second round, you say, well, we gave up Kakko in a first and another asset and for a player that we can't sign in the summer. Granted, cap's going up. Currently, Filip Chytil with the long-term IR will bring in that tacked on $5.2 million. And along with that, the cap is being raised over the summer. So they could sign a player that they bring in. It's all about logistics, and it's all about what Chris Drury can do. I think he's proven in the past, though, and the Rangers brass can bring in as many players as they need. We saw it in 22, saw it in 23. They went the route of filling in roster needs. They went the route of bringing in superstars. I think they should quasi that. Try and bring in somebody, bring in some pieces, a 3C for sure, and potentially a right winger, and see where it goes from there. And I think the goal would be, to see if you can get players like an Edstrom and a Wheeler as black aces come playoff time.
Oh, I like that. I like that comparison you just did there, that analogy. I think I'm going to elaborate on, I think your strongest piece there that you mentioned is you cannot bring in, if you're Drury, you cannot bring in a player and give up Kakko, and then at the end it's a rental, and then at the end of the year, let's say we get ounced in the second round, and now we're sitting there with no Kakko, we're sitting there with a rental that we're not going to be re-signing, or a player that doesn't fit our long-term needs or our long-term plan. That I just simply cannot see happening. But at the same time, Drury needs to make a move, and I think evidently, the way this team is played within the last month, Chives, I think has kind of shifted my view on this. And I think, when you're looking at last year's team and looking at this year's team, I think at certain moments, this year's team, I think overall could be better than last year's team. However, I think right now we need to move more. We're more desperate to make a move than we were at last year's point. With the way that we've playing, again, I don't see it trending in a good direction. And in terms of Kakko, everybody, I think this is something that is only done if the return is worthwhile. And I know that Chives would certainly agree with that. I think you take this rumor and of what you make of it. And I think that to hear Kakko to me is on the block, I wasn't surprised, to be honest with you. I don't know. Were you surprised?
Where I was surprised was how it was backed by sources. Like I would believe that this is 100% true information. But does it surprise me? That's a good question, Steve-O. I think where it surprises me is at the point in the year, especially because the right wing is thin for the Rangers. So I think from the positional standpoint, yes, but the name, who the players become in the last 5 seasons, that does not surprise me. But Steve-O, I got a question for you. Bringing up how thin the right wing is. Although Kakko is potentially in play, do you support what the Rangers move, like whatever the future is for Kakko? Do you support that there is the potential to move on?
It's a good question. And again, I think if it's the right piece, yes. Listen, maybe I'm in a slim majority here, but I think it would be nice to see him get a shot with a new team at some point. I'm not saying that point is right now, but I think to what the type of player that he's kind of been shaped in, by first of all the front office and especially the fans. I don't think he's I think he's kind of a little bit below those expectations. And maybe he needs a change of scenery. And I think there's a good chance of him getting it. I don't know if it's going to be this year. But I think if the Rangers feel it's a trade that makes them a better team, I definitely would not be surprised to see us move on from him. I just don't think we'll trade him. I'll be honest. I think when you look at this team, and not only this year but the future as well, every season you start with a blank slate, and the way this cap's going, and Filip Chytil, there's a lot of questions on this team. I think Kakko is a very what's the word I'm looking for? He's a very solidifiable player that you could slot into the lineup. And again, there's no doubt that we need to add, a 3C and probably another scoring winger. I think that the only situation where Drury's going to trade Kakko is if we're sitting there at the deadline, and quite frankly, nobody's picking our other assets. and the asking price for the players, I'm sure Joey's got a few players in mind. I know us fans do, and we do as well. I'm sure if Jury wants those players and the asking piece is Kaapo and nothing else, then I think you might see Kakko go. But I think Jury's going to try and lean on some other assets first. That's just my opinion. But again, if the trade's right, let's make a deal, Chives. We need some reinforcements here.
Let's make a deal. Listen, I don't think Drew's going to wait to the deadline, though.
For
He's
sure.
aggressive. He is aggressive. We saw with Vladimir Tarasenko and Patrick Kane, they played like 10 games before the deadline. Like they were on the roster through, I believe Tarasenko was on the roster through February. And Kane came in towards the end of February, so before the deadline, a few days before. So with the team, though, I think it's going to take more than Kakko to get something at the to make a bigger move. And I'm going to be interested to see what they do. I think everything, though, is about the macro, and that's what's going to be very interesting. The New York Rangers organization declared a rebuild in 2018. It's now five seasons since then, 5 years. And with that, you have currently 3 forwards on the active roster, sans Filip Chytil, that were part of that. 2 of those picks were not traded for. They were essentially received in Kaapo Kakko and Alexis Lafreniere. Their back end is filled with rebuilt players that were part of that plan, right? But the forwards are not. And the forwards only account for 5% of the salary cap in Kakko, Lafreniere, and Will Cooley. Lafreniere and Cooley have arguably been 2 of the most effective forwards for the team this year. With that stated, if you move on from Kakko, does that damage the identity of the rebuild? Because even if you bring in a forward in their prime, now you're in win now mode again. And you were just in win now mode from 2012 to 2017. 2018, the wheels fall off. You declare a rebuild. You advance the rebuild more than once with certain moves, bringing in Artemi Panarin, bringing up Igor Shesterkin, bringing in Vladimir Tarasenko and Patrick Kane. And now you're at a point where, again, is this team a win now team? I don't think they've convinced me over the last few months. And with that stated, it's important because whatever moves occur are going to signal what identity this team is going toward. Is Chris Drury going to make a move and say, you know what, all the chips in? I believe it's going to be somewhere in between where he pulls up some players, maybe from Hartford to stock up, give them a test run, bring in some assets, do a little bit of both. And if he doesn't do anything, then they really believe in the thesis statement from the beginning of the year. Let's get the most out of this current team. And right now, it started off great, and it's odd because it seems that's been lost in the last month. With that stated, Steve-O, the hot topic, it's early. Let's talk. What's the one move you would make if you had Kaapo Kakko? You have potentially a first-round pick, maybe a conditional second, say, for next draft. I don't know. Hypothetically, who are you trading for right now?
Ooh, I like this question. Hold on, I want to touch upon what you just said before. Then, oh my goodness, if Jury doesn't make a move here, I mean that's just throwing in the towel right there at that point. I mean, oh my goodness, as us fans. But ooh, I like this question. This is a good one. There's a couple good candidates out there. I know that we touched upon Duclair last episode. I mean, he could be another good candidate option. I know that Adam Henrique on the Ducks, his name's been thrown around out there. That could be a low key option that I could see Drury going after. You kind of get the sense that Jury's going to do a little bit of both of what he did from 2 years ago and what he did from last year. I think he's going to go after. He's going to try and go after, a big piece. And I'm not talking we're not talking a Steven Stamkos piece here, but and then he's going to go after somebody, a lower tiered piece. But I think that Henrique is definitely a quality name out there. I know that Sean Monahan's name's been thrown around in that category. He could be another piece that could be thrown in there. I haven't fully articulated. Uh, Again, there's so many different options. I'm kind of at the stage right now where a lot of fans go through, where I'm changing my opinion every day. I'm like, I
Mhm.
want this guy. No, I want this guy. No, we gotta go for this guy.
Yeah.
And then there's the hypotheticals where, ooh, maybe we can snag this guy, but that is evidently not clear. Um, but I do think, before you weigh in here on who you think, I know you're gonna throw some good names at me. I think, and I thought you raised a fantastic question on where we are in the rebuild. I think we're, quite frankly, out of that stage right now, Chives, of the early stages of a rebuild. And I think, listen, we set the tone when we went to the conference finals. We set the tone there, and we obviously have a highly competitive team. I don't think we're in a rebuild phase anymore. We found our goaltender Shesterkin. Our defense has been pretty good. The amount of young players that we've been able to pump up and that have been successful. We had a fantastic year last year. In the regular season, postseason didn't pan out, but we still made the playoffs. I think we just got unlucky with our opponent and getting bounced. So considering the last 2 years and the first half, minus the last month this year, I think we're kind of move on for a different phase in the rebuild. I wanted to touch upon that because I thought you mentioned a great point there. But hit me, throw some names at me. Who you got?
I think, and this is off the board, and this is what I think makes this a little bit of a different trade deadline. The last few years, there's been a number of names out there. This year, it seems like there's very few names. They're on struggling teams, so those struggling teams are going to want future assets. The cap accrual, and with Filip Chytil's money on LTIR, it will give the Rangers the ability to acquire. I think they should look to promote from within if they can. That's been something I've been riding high on. Connor Mackey, great display. Why not? There's 13 games until the trade deadline. Why not give some of the guys in the organization that have earned it a look? Will Cooley's been playing great, right? He was a call. Johnny Brodzinski's been playing well. Maybe if he feels that pressure from maybe another force coming in and taking that position, he may play better, as Wheeler may. Kakko deserves a shot at the first right wing. With all that stated, Steve-O, one guy, depth muscle, Yanni Gourde. I think if you're going to package, it should be for a player like that. But Tanner Jeannot required way too hefty of a haul for Tampa to acquire. So I don't think the Rangers, if that is the benchmark, I don't think they go down that road. But Yanni Gourde could be interesting if they keep some cap. If you trade maybe, an asset or two and a sweetener, I think it could look pretty good. I don't believe Gourde is on the market, but I think that would be a good move for the Rangers. I think that would identify something where it's like depth scoring, middle six, bottom six guy. That's a playoff player, and that's proven he's a playoff player. So I think that's one guy. And I think Tarasenko, I still believe in. I think for $5 million with an Ottawa team that's struggling, why would you not go for a shooter? He's comfortable. He's been to New York. Put him on the first line. I don't believe there's a stipulation where I don't think Ottawa can retain salary. But with the cap accrual, with $5.2 million in the bank, why not? If you need a first line right winger, I think he should be option number one. Duclair is also there, and he's on a San Jose Sharks team that's just abysmal. I think that's going to benefit the Rangers in their negotiations. So I would say those names. Gensel's out, Stamkos is out. I don't believe Matt Zuccarello will be in the picture, but it would be interesting to see how that develops because, like anything else, things happen very quickly. I would say the off-the-board pick is Yanni Gourde for Chives.
Ooh, I like that. How about this? I'll throw another one at you that I've been kind of eyeing for a little bit now, and he's not really been thrown. His name has really not been thrown around, in these rumors. How about Jordan Eberle on the Kraken? Gord's teammate. I think he's another interesting one. We got to improve our 5-on-5 offense here, and I think it's pretty clear that we would like to leave the top unit of the power play untouched. So I think, in terms of that situation, I think Eberle is a clear fit there. Listen, he's a solid defensive winger. He does have high end playmaking ability, which is something that we could draw in here. He's not like an over the top type of player, but he could definitely be a player that we could acquire, as our scoring winner, as not, the big name. I think he would be, a great piece. And not only that, but he's the type of player we could experiment with, Chives. Maybe he slots in with Zibanejad and Kreider better than a player like Wheeler has or Kakko has. So I think he's another name to watch, because it doesn't look like Seattle. They've picked it up a little bit, but who knows the position that they'll be in. Moving on, and obviously, I'd love to see Tarasenko. I'd love to see Tarasenko. So I'll flip it back to you before we wrap. But I think Eberle's a name that is a low key option. Drury likes these low key finds. So that's a name that really no one's been throwing around. I'm surprised.
Yeah, and you know what? I think you think back to his Islander days. He struggled a little bit in their conference final runs, but with Seattle, he's found it. He was a key piece in their playoff 2 rounds last season. First time they dethroned the Stanley Cup champions in Game 7, the first round. He scored an overtime goal in that series. I love that pick. You want a player on that first line, I think, that has a finishing touch and that's also willing to get into the corners and get Kreider, Zibanejad the puck. That's the MO. Buchnevich played that way. Eberle plays that way. Tarasenko played that way. And I think that Kakko has that potential, but if you're going to make a move, it has to be for a player that can complement that top line. Has to. And I think Eberle was a great, great prediction, Steve.
Yeah, because again, I'm trying to think in terms of the grand scope of this. I'm trying to think who's going to fit in our current state of our team. And our team is a little messier than we would like. But I'm trying to think who could we slot up? We got to move somebody down to the third line. We got a second line. We're going to ping pong bounce around these lines. Blake Wheeler, I mean, is just, he's moving up and down these lineups and he's not performing, and who's going to mesh well with Kreider and Zibanejad when we need to get them popping. So again, I mentioned I haven't fully articulated who I think is going to, we have a little bit more time, who I think is going to mesh well with Kreider and Zibanejad, because I think that's going to be our main piece if we're going to get going here. Those two have to get going. But again, I like Jordan Eberle here. So we go, boy, Chives. This is going to be fun. Moving up here to the trade deadline. I know we're going to be dishing out those hot takes. And listen, Drury likes those moves early. Maybe he's gearing up already. We mentioned with sending Bonino down. Something could be incoming soon. We'll see. All we know is we got the All-Star game coming up. Obviously, the All-Star game. Unfortunately, Chives, when we were, in the beginning stages of high school and middle school, those were the prime days. 2016, 2015 for the All-Star game. Now, I don't think, unfortunately, the All-Star game is not quite as good as it was before. But, oh, well, that'll wrap us up here on this episode of Puck Talk CS. We've had a couple of good, really quality special guests recently on our last 2 episodes, so go check them out. Follow us on all of our platforms at Puck Talk CS as always. And always remember, it's just the luck of the puck.